Everyone thought Paul Newman had the ideal life. However, the Newman family was deceiving itself behind closed doors, which would eventually lead to their downfall. No one had the guts to say what really happened at the Newman residence for decades. Finally, at the age of 63, Nell Newman spoke out. The surprising details she divulged in an interview with CBS would alter the public's perception of their favorite actress forever. Which rumors regarding Paul Newman were confirmed by his daughter? Come with us as we reveal the tragic truths that brought down a beloved American family. A double life for Newman. The Westport, Connecticut, house of the Newman family appeared to be the picture-perfect mansion from the outside, but it was actually constructed on long-buried secrets. As a little girl, Nell Newman, the blonde daughter who enjoyed solitary writing beneath their large oak tree, learned the hard way that asking specific questions at their house may lead to the loss of her one and only love. On their wall, they displayed photographs of joyful family events. Photos can be deceiving just as much as the subjects themselves, as Nell discovered. On her 63rd birthday, Nell Newman gave an interview to CBS Sunday Morning, in which she revealed long-kept family secrets. Paul Newman, her famous father and a Hollywood celebrity known for his blue eyes, had his public image utterly ruined by her comments. He was portrayed as the ideal family man by everyone. However, Nell made it clear that he was actually leading double lives. There was the one where he wowed onlookers, and the one where he was secretly in love with someone else. Throughout Nell's childhood, she never witnessed her parents displaying genuine devotion for one another. They weren't even holding hands in the traditional way. Whenever she caught a glimpse of them embracing, it was always in front of the cameras, and their embraces were brief, like actors rushing through a scene they were bored with. His renowned blue eyes may have captivated millions of women, according to Paul Newman. However, he left his family to cope with the emotional vacuum he created by being icy and distant at home. I mean, just think of where our company could have gone if it had been around during the California gold rush. You mean California? All right. Through maintaining a disconnection and lack of presence, reading Newman's will was the worst part. Because of the extreme cold, his whole fortune was left to an unknown individual known only as RR, effectively wiping off any claim that his family may have had to it. This decision led many to wonder about Newman's extramarital affairs and who he was seeing who seemed more important to him than his family. The public's preconceived notions about their beloved actor were proven incorrect when the truth about RR and Newman's decision to abandon his family in order to conceal their affair finally surfaced. Paul destroyed the woman who had supported him for decades, all the while he was occupied with preserving his secrets. How did Joanne manage to remain alive after discovering his secret life? The devastating, unspoken reality of motherhood. Everyone adored Joanne Woodward because of her stunning good looks and elegant demeanor. She would, however, become utterly silent and emotionally aloof every time Paul Newman returned home. It was easy for Nell to recall how her mother would avoid showing even the most basic forms of affection. An example of this would be when Nell reached out to hold her hand as she was washing the dishes, acting as though physical contact were painstaking. Even Nell's daughter Joanne would put up even higher barriers around herself when asked whether she was sad. This wasn't due to anger, but rather a lack of understanding of how to express or receive love. Separation and silence were the pillars upon which the Newman house rested. Every morning before anyone else was awake, Paul would take off without revealing his destination. After a few days or even weeks, he would return, smile half-heartedly, and then head directly to his study, closing the door behind him. During these lengthy phone conversations, Nell could hear him joking and chatting. No, she could tell it wasn't her mother on the other line. However, Nell's world was turned upside down in the winter of 1972. Upon entering her mother's bedroom, she discovered Joanne seated on the floor, clutching a shattered wine glass. The amount of alcohol you drink is something I've been carefully monitoring. I consulted with Dr. Greenspun about the matter, keeping on top of the fact that Paul had lied to her repeatedly. A trembling Joanne gazed up at her daughter and spoke a word that struck her like a ton of bricks. Hollywood would never dare reveal that some males do not love women. There and there was the end of Nell's childhood. The foundations she had built up around her family just fell apart. Then Nell made a discovery that altered the course of events. Out of her dad's wallet fell an old Polaroid picture one day. In the photo, Paul Newman was seen embracing another man. It was more than just a photo of friends. His expressionless eyes spoke volumes. Instantaneous was Joanne's reaction when Nell presented the photo to her mother. The moment she laid eyes on it, she ripped it to shreds and hurled them into the fireplace. This picture was never to be seen again. Having visitors over really brought out the false family image. Paul dressed impeccably and sported fragrance he never used when unannounced guests from New York, such as Gore Vidal, Robert Redford, and other unknowns, visited the residence. His bedroom door would always lock at the conclusion of these nights. No one questioned his host in that room. The reason Joanne would abruptly depart from these events as if she were inconsolable was also left unexplained. She would return to a house adorned with Oscars, symbols of achievement, but no mention of joy or genuine affection. One family member was beginning to ask the unpopular questions, while the adults acted out their parts and remained silent. When the next generation's designated heir speaks up, what happens? The perilous inquiry. There was a great deal of expectation on him as the eldest son of Paul Newman. Everyone in the nation was watching Scott to see if he could match his famous father's legacy. Everyone thought he would live up to the legendary actor's reputation for charm, success, and talent. While still a high school student, Scott began to notice strange things happening at home. He had never seen his parents holding hands. Instead of comforting his mom when she cried, his dad would simply look away. Paul would merely smirk and ignore Scott's attempts at showing affection or expressing his love for him. Scott was deeply affected by the sight of his dad with other men. Friendships like these were serious business. There was obviously more going on, as was obvious to anyone. As Scott matured, he became increasingly unable to disregard what lay before him. It was impossible to overlook the pattern, and then it all came crashing down. A rude remark was uttered by an inebriated youth in 1974. The place where all good vows should be, in my backyard, I placed them. Very well. Therefore, why don't you reveal who the true pledge master is? Oh, please. I told Scott that before he tried to follow in his father's acting footsteps, he should ask him if men or women were his favored roles. Scott lost it, unleashing a torrent of pent-up rage and hurt. The child required 6 stitches from his severe beating. Within a week, Scott was expelled from school. Scott lived with a single unanswered question. Has his dad ever been authentic? For Scott, as Paul's son, what did all of that imply? The problem is that Scott didn't die from a drug overdose or anything similar. He didn't have the strength to hear the truth from anyone in his family. And as a result, he died. He was utterly shattered by the weight of taboo family matters. Nell began to make sense of everything after Scott had left. The foundation of their entire family and everything in it was a web of deceit. Plus, these were no harmless fibs. For decades, their home was tainted by these kinds of secrets. Scott lost all faith in his family because of how utterly flawed their foundation was. Living with all the falsehoods was too much for him. The perfect family act and her dad's renown were, as Nell discovered, nothing more than a series of tightly guarded secrets. Secrets were a problem for more than just Paul. In the end, they killed his child. Being a guest at your place before doesn't disqualify me from dating someone else. That is, prior to your date with Roger. Now we're transported to a chilly winter evening in 1981. At the age of 22, Nell was on her way to the kitchen for a blanket when she abruptly halted outside her father's study. A hazy ray of yellow light was filtering in via the open door. Still, it was this noise, an internal sigh, that piqued her interest. It didn't sound like an actor rehearsing lines or a weary person's voice after a lengthy phone conversation. It was unique. The sound betrayed the impending explosion of someone's secrets. Nell felt compelled to sneak up to the door and sneak a peek through the crack. Her entire understanding of her family was shattered by what she witnessed. A solitary Paul Newman sat at his desk, gripping a fountain pen tightly, jotting down notes on an enormous stack of papers. He wasn't penning a screenplay or some business document. The handwriting was so familiar to Nell that she had only seen it on Christmas cards sent to her mother. It was a personal message. However, Joanne had no business receiving this lengthy letter. The beginning was, "Dear Red, the one who reminds me that I am still human, not merely a symbol." Everything fell into place at that moment, and Nell froze. At last, the answers to all the strange questions I had as a kid were here. None of that Hollywood nonsense, movies, stardom, etc., was mentioned in the letter. Paul, on the other hand, was describing Robert Redford's eyes in the last scene in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which took place in the Utah desert. Unnoticed instances of Redford's hand lightly touching his shoulder were detailed in his writing. He reminisced about the times they'd sit on hotel rooftops sipping whiskey and not utter a word, because if they did, their emotions would surface. In Paul's clandestine universe, though, Robert Redford wasn't alone. Nell was about to be even more shocked when news of another relationship broke. Beyond his family, who else was Paul trying to conceal? The hotel of Gore Vidal's secrets. Reporters would only get Joanne Woodward to talk about Robert Redford. Two emotionless terms that flat out denied knowing him or acknowledging any connection to him. As Nell delved more into her studies in ecology, she began to see that her parents' marriage lacked genuine affection. The two performers clung to their roles for 50 years to keep their made-up lives together, and it was more like an acting profession than anything else. However, after decades of hiding the truth, a single letter, an anonymous phone call, and a hotel room exposed the secrets that had always lurked beneath their seemingly ideal marriage. Finding the letter made Nell pay more attention to details she had previously ignored. In an old chest in her dad's study, she discovered a stack of phone books that included only letters such as R and T, complete anonymity. There were several crossed-out numbers. Some others, without informing Joanne, received notes instructing them to call back after 10 p.m. Underneath the family portraits, she discovered several folded-up images. These depicted random people staring at her father with feelings of love that were clearly beyond friendship. Nell was about to believe she had a handle on her father's hidden existence when she learned that Robert Redford might have been the most pivotal figure. However, her father had feelings for more than only him throughout the years. As Nell stood in the New York City lobby of the Carrile Hotel in 1981, the truth struck her like a ton of bricks. After her interview at the TV station, she merely needed to drop off some paperwork for her mom. Something stunned her as the elevator doors opened. Gore Vidal, a well-known writer and longtime family friend of Paul Newman's, walked out with her. However, Gore's behavior that night was far from typical of a buddy. As Paul grinned, he gently touched Paul's wrist, allowing his hand to linger there before releasing it. Without being friends, they were behaving like lovers. A gentle wind could have brushed over the men's faces as they strode side by side, wrapped in their heavy coats. The love conflict was plain to see. Being cautious in public would not be enough to conceal it. A sight that will stay with Paul's daughter forever was his reaction upon seeing her standing there. The expression on his face did not befit a father who had been caught red-handed. It seemed more like he was pleading with her in silence, as their family had done for generations, to remain silent in the face of what she had just witnessed. As if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired, Gore grinned at Nell. Paul wasted no time boarding the elevator. Standing motionless as the doors shut, Nell now bore the burden of yet another family secret. She was aware that Gore Vidal would remain. In her father's clandestine life, he would remain an integral element. As the Newman family story demonstrates, secrecy can lead to disaster for all parties concerned. Pull it off. You have no idea. Up there he was lying in bed, identified with Rhoda Hayward beautifully. Paul Newman remained a mystery his entire life. It was painful for more than just him. It shattered his wife Joanne's will and killed his son Scott. It took Nell until she was 63 years old to finally speak the truth about all the lies her family had told her. The worst thing is that Scott didn't make it because he was haunted by secrets no one would discuss and never received the answers he needed. When reading this, one can't help but wonder what happens when a prominent person has decided whether to be truthful or safeguard their career. During Paul Newman's era, being gay might spell disaster for a Hollywood actor. However, there was a hefty cost to remaining in the closet. It utterly annihilated his family. Scott would still be alive today, and their family might not have crumbled if Paul had the guts to be himself. Have you any thoughts on the impact that Paul Newman's extramarital affairs had on his loved ones? In order to save their professions, Do you think prominent people should be able to mask who they really are? On the other hand, should they always tell their loved ones the truth? Leave a remark with your ideas. We'd really appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, and share this video if you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.